Good evening. Good evening. Yeah, it's such a joy for me to be here. For me, Tulsa is very, very special. As Brother Litty was sharing, it's very special because of the people here. And I was connected to Tulsa when I was in 4th grade and did not know that I would be part of something in Tulsa. And there's an organization called Compassion International. And I joined the school, and I remember me joining the school, and suddenly my stepmom told me, saying, hey, from this week, you will get free food in the afternoon. And I was very excited. I just said, oh, free food, that's just fantastic. And they were giving very good food. I said, Mom, why are they giving free food? They said, oh, they enrolled you as a compassion child, and somebody is going to sponsor you. They're going to send nickels and dimes for you to, study in the school. So I was very excited. And I was a little disappointed after I came to know who sponsored me, because it was a group of children from Tulsa, Mingo Valley Christian School. It were 5th graders and 6th graders who sponsored me. And the reason why I was so discouraged seeing the children sponsor me, because I had all my other friends sponsored by some rich couples everywhere, and they would get gifts, and I would get letters after letters after letters. And being a compassion child, you need to understand when there is a letter, you have to reply to that letter. And those days, I didn't want to reply, I didn't want to write, and I would like to run around as a little 4th standard kid. But I still remember my teacher calling up and said, you've got letter, you have to reply. And there were letters from American kids and very funny stories. Do you see tiger next to your home? Do you see snakes? Have you caught snakes? Have you eaten scorpions? These were the kind of, questions that would come. So as a 4th standard, 5th standard kid, I would just said, why are these kids sending messages like this? And so I would just write, And it was a very interesting thing, that my teacher would make a sample letter and I have to copy because, of course, my English was not great. So I have to copy, and I still remember my teacher would be beating me up and said, write it, write it. Then I would be like, yeah, I love you so much. Thank you so much for sponsoring me. And that was my memory of, being a compassion child. Then I graduated. I was very grateful that Compassion sponsored, and then I graduated high school. Then I was leading an American team in India. And as I was leading this team, I was sharing my story. When I was sharing my story, this American lady walks up to me and says, which school is that in Tulsa? I said, I know my number, my compassion number, 0473. It's Mingo Valley Christian School. I don't know anything else. Because sponsorship, they don't give you the address of your sponsors. I said, I don't know anything else. She immediately started crying. She said, that's right next to my house. And I said, really? So she goes back, comes to Mingo Valley School. Now, Mingo Valley is in a new building right now, but before they were at another place. And she goes there and says, I met your compassion child, and my picture was still in the hallway. This is after years. It was still in the hallway. And all of the teachers began to come to her and said, really, can you give us? And those days, the only way of connection was Facebook. And so they sent a message on Facebook. I started connecting with them. And I applied for the visa to just come to America so that I can just meet the people and just say thanks. I was denied visa for 7 times to come to America. And I was so discouraged. And one time what happened, Mingo Valley, what they did was they had a senator from Tulsa write on my behalf. So I was very sure that they're going to give me a visa. I went there for the immigration officer. The officer said, you even know a senator, so you're going to settle down there. So we're not giving you a visa. So I was very discouraged. And these are people who were sending me emails and said, George, we want you, we want you. I said, I too want to come, but I don't know. And then I was invited at Willow Creek Church in Chicago, Bill Hybels' church, to do a workshop in a conference. It was just a 40-minute workshop. And they gave me a 3-day visa. And when they gave me a 3-day visa, I went to Chicago for 1.5 days, finished that workshop. For the next 1.5 days, I came to Tulsa. And I still remember the day I landed in Tulsa. I was just telling my son, Jerry, on the first time I landed in Tulsa, there was a school band on the airport with all the cymbals and trumpets and trombones. And I was like, oh, maybe somebody is coming. And then that teacher said, George, it's for you. It's the school band that has come. I think I only spent a day. But that whole day, there were several people came to me and said, we couldn't send gifts, but we fasted and prayed for you. There were so many of those children. They were all around my age. They were fifth graders. And now they've all grown up and they had a reunion that evening. All of them came with their families. And they all came and said, I used to fast and pray for you. I used to do this. I used to do that. I used to remember you. I am the one who wrote the letters. And I brought those letters back. I had some of those letters, especially one time, I still remember one December time, my teacher came and said, there's a parcel for you. And I was very excited. I said, finally, the school has sent me a gift. So I went and ripped over the brown cover. It was a group of letters put together into a book. And I brought that book back, and several of them, Stephanie was there, there was another, Nathan was there. They all said, that's my letter. I wrote that letter. That's a letter. I want to say this. When God has a purpose for you, He fulfills it by His way. No matter what you think, no matter how our plans are. That's why I love that verse. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. His ways are higher than our ways. And He accomplishes His purpose. One of my favorite verses, Isaiah 46:10. And it says, I will do all that pleases me, declares the Lord. I know the end even from the beginning. And this evening I thought, let me just share my heartbeat. My heartbeat has always been intentionally discipling the next generation. And that, I believe, is the key need of the hour. Where we disciple our children, we disciple our next generation, our teenagers, our young people. That's the key need of the hour. I was at one of the schools speaking. I speak in a lot of secular schools. And some years ago, I was speaking at the school where one of the parents came to me and said, sir, I need your help. I said, tell me. She said, I work in software. This is Bangalore. I work in software. My husband works in hardware. My children are nowhere. And she put it in a very, lovely way, but then she literally had tears in her eyes, and she just said, I don't know how to handle these kids. I don't know how to handle my teenagers. I really don't know what it is. It's a different generation that has come. And it's very interesting that for this evening, I picked up one verse, Romans chapter 13, verse 11. Romans chapter 13, verse 11. And this was a powerful verse where Paul says, do this knowing the time, that it is already the hour for you to awaken from sleep. For now, salvation is nearer to us than when we believed. I believe, with all the signs that's happening, we are in the last days. We are very close to God's return. We are definitely in the last days. And Paul says this so beautifully. He says, do this knowing the time, that it is already the hour for you to be awakened from sleep. For now, salvation is nearer to us than when we believed. There are three essentials in discipling the next generation from this verse, I would put it. One, we must develop an awareness of the time. We must develop an awareness of the time. When I'm saying the awareness of the time, knowing the time, Paul was not just talking about ignorance. I don't know. More significantly, he was confronting one's indifference. I don't care. He was basically just talking about that. If you look at that verse again, he just says, do this knowing the time. He says, don't be indifferent. Don't be careless. Know the time. The time is very near. So Paul says, that you want to know the time that we are living in. We have to step in like never before to disciple the next generation. We must develop an awareness of the time. We must develop an awareness of the time. A time that we are in where we step in. I counsel a lot of teenagers on social media. Yesterday, there was a teenager who sent me a message, and it was a very difficult message. She said, Uncle, my brother has heard you in one of the schools, and he's struggling. He is now 27, and he doesn't want to do anything in life, and he's moving on. Last night, he tried to commit suicide. And she reached out to me, and this morning, I sent a message to him, and he just said, Uncle, I know you. I've heard you several times in that school, and I love to talk to you. Now, what are these teenagers looking out for? They're looking out for someone to be there. I would just put this challenge. This is a time, it's not time for just one person to say, oh, they have this ministry among teenagers or young people, and they're doing the discipleship. I think this is a time that every one of us have to stand up to disciple the next generation. We have to stand up. If we don't stand up and disciple the next generation, we are going to lose our kids and our churches are going to become empty. And it's already happening in Europe. It's already happening in different places across the world. It's already happening. This morning, somebody came from Mingo Valley. She was a teacher at that school, and all her 5 daughters have prayed for me and sponsored me, and I always come and meet her. And she took me out today, and she was telling about one of her daughter. And she said, George, she's not there anymore with the Lord. She's not there anymore. We raised her up in the Lord and in that place. And yes, there are things that has happened, but she's not there. And this lady was, in her late 60s, and she is just standing there and saying, George, I wish somebody else who can help me out. I wish somebody else who can do things, on a place of how it is. So we must develop an awareness of the time. The next thing that you see in that verse is this. But before that, let me ask you a question, a simple question. Which is the next biggest domain for ministry to the next generation or among the next generation? Which is the biggest domain? Social media, okay. Anyone else? This is just based on research, and I was doing the research, and it's just an amazing statistics. Music, okay. The Barna, if you know of the Barna Group statistics talking about the next generation, the recent statistics research says the next biggest domain is mental health. The next biggest domain for ministry among the next generation is mental health. There are so many, right? Especially after COVID, there are many, many young people are talking about making statements like panic attacks, making statements like anxiety disorders, depressions and all. To rise up, not to, crucify them or not to brand them, not to, put a label on them, rather to stand alongside to see how we can mentor these children, these teenagers, of how we can. And we are beginning to see this. Everywhere we're beginning to see this among young people of the things that's happening. So when you talk about the second thing that Paul talks about here, it says, we must develop an alertness of the danger. That's why he uses the word awaken from sleep. Paul wasn't merely dealing with the condition of drowsiness here. He was not saying, I don't have energy. No, that was not the point. He was rather highlighting the danger of distractions. I don't have time. I think with the mobile phone that has come in, it's a funny thing that recently a young 8th standard kid sent me a message on Instagram, and he said, both my parents are so caught up with phones. Whom should I talk to? Because in the school I talked and I said, hey, go and share with your parents. Go and share your day with your parents. And that's what I was encouraged. And he sends me a message in the evening and he says, both of them are so caught up in the phones and doing things. To whom should I talk to? I believe Paul was just talking about that distractions, that place of distractions where we have to step in intentionally to take time. It's very interesting. I don't know about America, but in India, a lot of the teenagers are, about 6-7 years ago, they all came into Instagram. And I was just wondering, why you guys are all coming into Instagram? He said, Uncle, we all want to get into Instagram because my parents have come on Facebook. Now, all my parents are on Facebook, and they're putting out reels and they're putting out things. So we don't want to be there on Facebook. So we want to be, in Instagram so that we can communicate of what it is, in a place and things like that. I think Paul was talking something very, very important here. The danger of derailment from distraction is a real and subtle danger. The danger of derailment from distraction is a real and subtle danger. Life is too short to live purposelessly and too precious to live carelessly. I think we are called, especially in these last days. I believe this very, very strongly. I've made this statement several times. This is not a time for one Billy Graham, one C.H. Spurgeon, one Smith Wigglesworth. No. It is a time for anyone and everyone who is willing to put their hand up and say, Lord, here I am. And the Lord is ready to use us. And the Lord is ready to use us. Anyone and everyone who is willing to put their hand up and say, Lord, here I am. And God is ready to use us in a powerful way. The third essential that I would say in discipling the next generation, we must develop an attentiveness to our mission. When Paul says, for our salvation is nearer than when we believe, he wasn't merely dealing with the what. Rather, he was talking about the why. He was really talking about the why. Paul was calling out attention to the imminent return of Christ. We need to reach out to the hurting generation and stand in the gap, love them and disciple them, because Christ's coming is very near. We can't lose our children. We just can't lose our teenagers. We can't lose our young people. Several times I've seen this. They may not like what you say, the next generation, but they will always imitate what you do. They may not like what you say, but they will always imitate what you do. They are silently, recently I was talking to one of the boys whom I was counseling, and it's been the same case several times, even for us. When you are in a crisis situation, what's the first thought that comes in? The first thought would come in, if you are close to your dad, then your thought would be, if my dad was in that situation, how would he react? How would he respond? If you're close to your mom, if my mom was there in that situation, how my mom would react. That's the thought that comes in, because that's where the attachment is. And from the attachment comes the orientation of how we begin to see things, comes from our attachment. So I believe this, the biggest need of the hour right now for us to step in, because the Christ calling is very, very near. So we have to move from being consciously compassionate to becoming competently compassionate. I need to become competent on how I begin to disciple, how I begin to work with those children, how I begin to help my children in a place of what it is. My story started off, some of you must have heard my story. My story started off when I was just about 16, 17 months old, when my dad had poured kerosene, here they use the term gasoline, and burnt her alive. She was 23 years old, a 23-year-old Malayali girl. I didn't know about that. I've seen my father's hand with some, burnt marks and all of that. I've always asked him, and he always said, oh, I was in the army, and, in the army I was in the fight and all of that, and that's where it happened. He would always say that, and I would just say, okay, fine. But my stepmom would always tell me, no, something else has happened, nobody knows about it. Something else has happened, nobody knows about it. Because she, much later, much later, when I was much older, maybe about 15, 16, it's my stepmom who told me, saying, I think, you need to know that you are not my son, and you had your mom, and your mom died. And I don't know, I hear a lot of different stories, but I don't know how she died. I was 24 years old. I was in Tiruvalla. And I was coming to Bangalore because I heard that my grandmom, they're all Malayalis, and I said, my Amachi and all of them are there. So I said, okay, let me just come to Bangalore just to visit where they are. And I had to see some contacts with some of the pastors and show me where their house is. And I found out which part of Bangalore they were in. At that time, I had not settled down in Bangalore. I was in Kerala at that time. And I had come to Bangalore. And I went, my Amachi was sitting outside in the easy chair. And I walked in. And that evening was a very difficult evening. All my aunts had come together. They were very surprised. They're seeing me after so many years. They've seen me as a 17, 18-month-old child. And they're seeing me after so many years. And that whole evening, they talked about how my dad was so cruel and how he was a drunkard and how he would beat up my mom and how my mom would cry so much. And every time she would try to protect me and how she would fall on me when my dad would be kicking her and how she would do it. And then she would just put me in another place. It seems she had a little parrot called Pretty Polly. And she trained the parrot that every time when I would cry, Pretty Polly would say, Leo is crying. She didn't call me George or Ebenezer. She would call me Leo. And the little Pretty Polly would say, Leo is crying, Leo is crying. And she would come down to help. And she was so suffocated, it seems. And she was a very godly lady. She would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and pray. And she would always pray this prayer, my husband should change, my husband should change. And every time her sisters would just say, leave him and go, she would say, no, I want to be here, I want to be here. There was one evening, my dad brought a sari, a new sari, and gave it to my mom and said, I love you so much. And my mom thought God is answering prayer. But she didn't know that my dad had got a sari that would catch fire very easily. And gave it to her. She wore it. And as she had worn it, and he poured the kerosene on her and lit her on fire that evening. It seems he emptied the water tanks and there was no water and she was screaming, and my dad had pushed her inside not to escape the house. And that's how it was all burnt. His hands were all burnt. Now, this story was gripping my heart, but what's gripped my heart was this. It was very difficult for me to forgive my father. It was very difficult for me to forgive my father. I've seen him, what he has done. I don't want to go into the details with the little children being here and all that. So a lot of things that he had done. And I was very, very angry against my father, very bitter against my father. And that evening, my aunts sat together and said, you know what your mom did? I said, I know you've told a lot of things today, but please tell me. We didn't sleep that night. We were up till 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. They were just sharing. And then my oldest of my aunt, she just came in and she just said, no, tell him what happened on the last day. And I said, what happened? And then they said, we had the video camera ready. We had the court papers ready. Her name is Hepsi. And they told Hepsi, we want you to speak. And she had a 3rd-degree burn. She was not able to speak very well. And on her deathbed, they said, just make some statements. We want to put this man in prison. They switched on the video camera. Epsima was lying down there, and they wanted her to speak. But when she began to speak, all my aunts began to scream. They said, Epsi, don't do it. Epsi, don't do it. You know why they were screaming? Because my Epsima, 23-year-old girl, on her deathbed, she looked into the camera and she said these words, on my deathbed, I want to forgive my husband because I want to see the favor of God on my son. Bring my son. I was brought for the next 24 hours. She held me tightly and she screamed 3 prayers. This boy should become a blessing to the nations, not just India. This boy needs a mother, send him a mother, and give him a big family and a lovely wife. And she prayed that prayer. I'm standing here as a result of God's favor. Nothing else. Nothing else. I know when I was growing up on the streets, getting beaten up every night, and how I would go and do things, and I would struggle. I would steal everywhere because I would be hungry, and I would just steal everywhere, and I would just go around. And I sometimes wonder, why is God's favor so much? And I really believe God answered that 23-year-old's prayer. I really believe that. Unusual ways I've seen favor. Unusual ways I've seen favor. And sometimes I don't even understand, Lord, why is this favor on me? Why is you leading me this way? Even now, we have 10 adopted kids, 2 foster kids, and 2 biological kids. We have 14 kids inside the house. Sometimes people ask me, how are you in the world handling all these teenagers inside the house? Oh, we cry out every day. Even yesterday, Manju told me one of my boy acted very cranky yesterday, and yesterday morning Manju was up and she was crying. But we look at each other, and this morning when I was talking to her, this is what I encouraged. Hey, God has called us to it. If God has brought us to it, He will take us through it. If God has brought us still here, He will take us through it. And I've seen unusual favor of God. Even Mingo Valley coming in to help. I didn't even know that there were people praying. Now, did they know that I tried to commit suicide? They didn't know. One time I took 35 crocin tablets, paracetamol tablets. I went to the top of the terrace. I looked up and said, you can't save me. Because my father would beat me so badly that my back would be bleeding and I can't sleep like this. And sometimes there's no food in your tummy and your back is bleeding. It's a very difficult combination. And I would just sit there and say, why am I struggling like this? So one morning, I still remember I was up. I took 35 crocin tablets. It was an open terrace. And I took the tablets and I went off to sleep, thinking I'm just going to die. Morning, I got up and I went down and I was trying to brush my teeth. And then I realized I had taken 35 crocin tablets. There was not even a diarrhea. So I just said, Lord, why are you doing this? I jokingly say, okay, made in India, maybe, But I don't know why. And I still remember after just a year later, I was a cricket player. I was a very strong sportsman. I found my attention in sports. I was into volleyball, table tennis. I was a district badminton player. I was a state cricket player. I was into sports. And there was a coach that was there. I couldn't pay him, but he said, you play very well, you come. I played for under 19, for the state. And when I was playing and going for coaching and things like that, there was one time my father came one evening to me and said, I've done something, you will never again play cricket. I said, why? What? What did you do? He said, you will know it. Next morning, I got up at 5 o'clock to go for my coaching. I go there, and my friends come to me and say, the coach told us not to allow you to come and play. I said, why? Why? And I came back, and I was so upset, and then I called my friend, and I just said, hey, can you just find out why it is? And, oh, you should have not done it. I said, what did I do? My father went and told my coach that I had raped some girls, which I had never done or anything, and he went and told that lie. So my coach said, we are not going to have you come and join. For me, my only place was cricket, and that was taken out. I was 14 and a half year old. I was standing at 9:30 in the night on a highway, and I decided that day saying, I'm not going to go for medicines. I'm just going to jump in front of a truck and end my life. There's a huge truck coming. There was nobody on the road, 9:15, 9:30 in the night. The truck coming, and I planned my truck, and I looked up, and I was like challenging God. I was 14 and a half, that's a chicken brain, that's all I knew. And I looked up and I said, God, you can't save me now. The truck came very close with all my strength, and I jump in front of the truck. When I jump in front of the truck, a huge hand takes me by my chest and throws me behind. I fall in a muddy puddle. The truck goes by, and I was very upset with the man who saved me. I looked around and I said, who's that guy who saved me? There was nobody there on that road. I still remember that night when I was walking back. Half of the time I never went back home to sleep. I would sleep in graveyards. I would go and sleep in half-built houses. And I still remember that night I went in and I cried. You know what I cried? I said, Lord, why are you not even allowing me to die? Can't you just allow me to die? I just want to go. That's it. That's all it is. That's all I want to do. And it was as if I was fighting against something. But I didn't know there were people here in Tulsa, Mingo Valley Christian School, every Thursday gathering and praying for this boy. I didn't know there were families fasting and praying in the dinner time, and the children would not eat that dinner so that they can save that money to send for that boy. I didn't know. That's why I said that statement. If God has a purpose, nobody can thwart it. Nobody can stop it. We walk boldly and courageously because His purpose stands. We come to that place to understand. If you look at the pictures, you will see a lot of pictures. That's me being in the school, and that's the letters that would come, from the children. They would that yellowish kind of a paper where they would write and send and things like that. And you see that little baby. That little baby is my stepmom's son. And he was about 7-8 months old when my stepmom gave birth, and my father in the middle of the night went and twisted the neck and killed my stepbrother. Now, I'll say something very interesting. My dad, who had murdered my mom, murdered my stepbrother, then in my 8th grade, I saw my father kill my grandfather. You know what he was doing? He was an evangelist. He was a preacher. He's very good in communication. I think I've got some DNA from him. You have this, expression called, he can sell an ice to an Eskimo. That's the kind of a guy he was. He can speak so well. And he would always speak so well. If he didn't have money to drink, he would always go tell people that he's doing things, and he would give them a receipt, get the money, and if there's good money, he would bring Scotch whiskey or the local liquor. Or he would go and preach in churches. And I always knew he only had 3 sermons. And he would just mix those 3 sermons and he would speak. Now, when I saw this, very young, I started working with children. When I was just 14 years old, I would spend time at an orphanage next to my home. And I would spend time with those children. And in some of the camps, as a compassion child, you are supposed to attend 2 Christian camps every year. And there's an organization called CEF, a Child Evangelism Fellowship, and they would conduct these camps, and I had to attend these camps. And in all of these camps, I would have the nudge in my heart of coming into ministry, but I always resisted because I hated to come into ministry. Why? If I'm going to come into ministry, people who know my dad are going to look at me and say, like father, like son. I resisted. For so many years, I resisted. I said, I am not going to come into ministry. It was much later, though I was in ministry, very, very young, I came into ministry. I was 18, 19 when the Lord began to speak and said, can you walk my redemptive purpose? For me, the most holy place, apart from me being with the Lord in my private space, is a stage. When I'm getting on a stage, I always today look back and I said, is my relationship with my staff right? If my relationship with my wife right? With my children right? Because if I stand here without even getting some things that is not right, for me what haunts me is, are you becoming like your father? Because I don't want to be in that place. I really don't want to be in that place. Today I've 31 years, I've worked with children. I've traveled across India, almost every A grade, B grade city I have traveled. I've been in a place. Again, I've seen such favor of God. I joined Loyola College in Chennai. I was doing my psychology, sociology, and I had to leave home when I was 18. I couldn't be at home because I was going to kill my father. And somebody gave me a place to stay at a school. They said, if you come and stay at the school and help us out in the school. So I worked in that school for 3 years. I took care of everything in the school, whether it's annual day, sports day, march past, training the band. I play about 5 instruments, and I learned it to train the band. That's how I learned. And I would train that school, and I trained people in that school. And I would just be there because this man, it was very difficult for me to trust men because of certain things that happened to me when I was young. I'll leave it at that point. But this is the first man I started trusting. And there was something that happened in that school. When something happened, I was there in my final year, Loyola College, and I'm staying in that hostel. And something that happened in that school, when it happened in that school, the wife said, let's put the blame on George. So it's easy, because they want to cover a pastor's son who had done that. So they said, we want to cover him because the pastor is a very big pastor. Let's put the blame on George. And what they did was overnight. It was one day I came back from college and the watchman said, you're not allowed to come. And overnight they threw me out. And I sat there in the middle of a rain till 5:30 in the morning. It was 2:30 in the morning when I came, and from 2:30 till 5:30 I sat there crying. I said, Lord, this is the first time I trusted this man. And here I am standing in the middle of the road, and I was crying. At 5:30, I went there. I know this man gets up for prayer. I went there, and he didn't say anything, and I was just silly again. I was just about 21 years old. And I looked at him, and I said, if you're going to behave like this, I'm going to quit. As if I thought they want me so much, and that's why I'm there. And the moment I said, I'm quit, he immediately said, oh, that's fine, no problem. Watchman, give him the clothes, let him go. And I didn't know where to go. And you know what I did as a 21-year-old? I booked a ticket and I went to the remote parts of Northeast, Nagaland, and I walked in the villages and I ended up with half-naked people. And I said, I will work with the Konyak tribe. I'm going to be there. I will never again come back to the urban context. I will never again see people. I'll live with the tribal people and I will die there. I lived there for 2.5 years. That was my resolution. I said, I will never. For me, now to trust people was very, very difficult. I was just 21. Now, I'm quoting this incident because of the favor of God. After 2.5 years of being in different places of Nagaland and finally in that place with the Konyak tribe, my heart was not at rest. I always loved David Livingstone, and my prayer was, Lord, make me a David Livingstone. Make me a David Livingstone. And one night I went before the Lord and I wept in the bamboo house. I knelt down and I cried out and I just said, Lord, here I am and my heart is not at rest. Why? I want to be David Livingstone. I want to settle down here. I had even already seen a girl. I said, I'm going to marry a Konyak girl, a tribal girl, get married and stay here. That's it. And that night I heard an audible voice where the Lord said, I've already had a David Livingstone. I don't need another David Livingstone. I need you, George Ebenezer. I said, Lord, me? I wept that night. And then the only way forward is for me to come back to civilization. The Lord was nudging my heart. You need to get back to civilization. You need to get back to the urban context. I said, Lord, I can't. The Lord said, you have to. That's when I came to Kerala. And I came to Kerala, joined a Bible college. Now look at the favor of God. I joined a Bible college because I have not finished my undergrad degree. Though I finished till the last semester, my last exams I have to finish, that's all. Though I attended all the classes, but I don't have the degree. So when I joined the Bible college, they said, you don't have a degree, you have to start with Bachelor of Theology. I said, fine. So I joined the Bachelor of Theology. I do it for 1 year, the favor of God. The next year, the principal calls me and said, all my professors tell me that you're on a different level. We want to promote you to master's degree. Today, I don't have a bachelor's degree, but I have a master's degree. I've seen unusual ways God help. Unusual ways God having His favor. Sometimes I look around and I said, second year I went to MDiv. Second year I went to MDiv, and third year what happened? Third year the principal calls me up and says, the organization director, his name is KP Johanan, and said, he wants to talk to you. And I said, really? And he came and said, George, I know you're in your second year of MDiv, but we want you to take up the position of being a director for 6 countries for children and youth work. And I started working in my second year of my master's. I hardly went to classes. I was traveling around in different places doing things. Now, I just want to say this. I love this statement by Edmund Chan. It says, it's a certain kind of a person with a certain kind of a purpose who goes through a certain kind of a process to reproduce a certain kind of a product. We are all a certain kind of people that God has called us. It's a good place to say amen. We are all a certain kind of a people. And we are a certain kind of a people with a certain kind of a purpose over our lives. If I die tonight and I'm gone, I am gone. Nobody can replace me on planet Earth. I think that's the conviction that we need to have, that we are here for a purpose. And the Lord has put here for a purpose. It's a certain kind of a person with a certain kind of a purpose. Not any kind. It's a certain kind. It's a unique kind, who goes through a certain kind of a process. What I have gone through is what I'm giving today. I'm able to, my heart breaks for children who are struggling. My heart breaks for teenagers who are struggling. Why? Because my story didn't break me. My story is what made me. Our stories don't break us. Our stories make us. We are who we are is because of our story, because of what we have gone through. Sometimes we don't want to even think about the difficult times that we have gone through. I would just say, ask God to redeem those times and make that into a purposeful time. Ask God to redeem those times, because He is able to redeem those times, redeem those difficult times, in our life. I'll close with this. Right now in Bangalore, we are building India's first emotional trauma center. Now, for me, I'm a discipleship guy. I'm a guy who has worked with children, trained Sunday school people, youth people, teens. When the Lord told me saying to start a counseling center, a center which will be a professionally placed, at the same time, the passionately discipling the next generation, I just said, Lord, how is that going to happen? And today, after so many years, we are now about 15 years now, the organization started. Now we mentor a lot of children from different orphanages. We don't run an orphanage, but we mentor people who have orphanages, different orphanages. Right now we are mentoring about 32 to 35 different orphanages we mentor. We have about different clinical psychologists on the team. We go there and we help them. And all our core team, all our clinical psychologists, everyone are grounded in the Word of God, are very strongly rooted in Jesus. Because psychology has a problem where it starts taking you onto a different place. We can only use psychology as a tool. At the end of the day, we have to come to the redemptive purpose of God. We have to come to the cross. We have to come to the cross. We can only use that as a tool. And we have started training hundreds and hundreds of teachers, people from different parts of India. People are calling, and we were just there 3-4 weeks ago before I came here. We were in Calcutta training up people who rescuing some of these girls from red light zones, but they're not knowing how to deal with them because the behaviors are horrible behaviors. And they're saying, can you please train us, in a place? And I love spending time with mentoring students. Today, you know what? In a secular context, teenagers are thirsty. This is a very beautiful picture in one of the schools in Delhi. After the school had finished, the children, all of these teenagers opted to not go by bus, told their parents, and they said, we want to spend an extra time with George sir. And everyone came into the auditorium and sat there. They sat there till 6 o'clock in the evening saying, sir, we want you to speak. And they're not a Christian crowd. There's a secular crowd. But they're sitting there and saying, just to speak, we want to listen. When God has called you for a purpose, I'm making that statement again. No power of hell, no scheme of man can ever pluck you from his hand. And I love that song that you guys sang today, In Christ Alone. No power of hell, no scheme of man can ever pluck us from his hand. Keep us in your prayers, and I would finish at a time where we would just pray and close. But today we are building this place, it's a play therapy center, art therapy, calming rooms, proprioception rooms, counseling pods, discipleship rooms, workshop rooms, all of that. These are some of the renders of what it is, of how it's going to happen. And something I'm telling the team, we want to make it a state of art, one of its kind. This is the first center in the whole of India. This is the first center in the whole of India. And I said, and I believe this very strongly. I tell my team all the time, when we as believers, when we do it, I think we need to be the trendsetters. We need to do it well. And the world should come to a place of how we begin to do it. So we have already created ideas of how it would look like. A lot of different ideas that every part of the center, whether it's the wall, it'll be interactive walls, it'll be interactive floors of how we are going to make it. Where, though we are calling it a counseling center and all of that, we don't want this center to be a place where the children would just be beaten up and said, you're behaving wrongly, come. I want to change that in India. I want the center to be so fun-filled, so vibrant, and human puppets walking around, maybe Goofies and Elmos and, Mickeys walking around. So the children should tell their parents, I've been behaving wrongly, right? Take me to that counseling center. That's what I want. I want to flip that switch. I want that to happen. I know that happened just even recently, last month. My watchman called up and said there's a 15-year-old who's come standing, from one of the schools. And I said, why he has come? And then I told somebody, just check. And they said, no, he has come. He just wanted to spend some time with you. He feels that he's struggling and he needs some counseling. And I said, okay, let him sit. We'll come. So I came down and, spent time. He was in one of the schools where I already helped him and things like that. And Aaron coming there and just spending time there, just seeking to just come and sit there that evening was very different. And I said, hey, Aaron, why do you? He said, no, uncle, I think I'm not making the right decisions. And I think I want to just spend some time with you. And I just want to talk to you. See, that's what we want to do. We want to do it in a place where the children feel so loved. I believe this. For any interventions, for any change to happen in the next generation, first is relationship, relationship, relationship. And that's where the Bible is summed up. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. Love the neighbor as yourself. In these two, all the commandments are summed up. It is relationship, relationship, relationship. Children are hurt in relationships, but children can also be healed in relationships. This is what we have already built now, in that place of what it is. And intentionally discipling the next generation is the key need of the hour. And our core thing that we are stepping out and going in is faith and venture. Because sometimes we have faith, but we don't boldly make decisions. Sometimes we boldly make decisions, but we don't have faith. I think both have to go hand in hand. Faith and venture. We, trust the Lord, but we step in, These are the places that we have already finished. It's a huge project. When the Lord just said, it's a $2.4 million US project. It's a 20 crore project. And when the Lord told about this project, and I just said, Lord, it's too big. And I still remember that time where I heard a gentle voice and said, because it's too big, you can't do it, only I can do it. And where are we right now? We are already raised 17 crores and already built. We are in the last 3 crores. Today, some of my friends look at me and just said, George, how did that happen? What are some of the things? I said, I have no idea from where funds came from. But it came from so many different places. We had a girl one time, a teenage girl, do dance classes for a whole month, and she raised 35,000 rupees. And in an Indian context, for somebody to raise that much, a teenage girl to raise that much and give was a big amount. And she said, no, uncle, I want to dance, and I want to make that money today. And this month is a holiday for me. So she's a very good dancer, professional dancer. And I want to dance, and I want to raise that. We have had several ways people come. It was in a school hostel once where I was sharing about this whole vision. This was some years ago. And the school hostel girls came together with their pocket money put together and raised up 42,000 rupees and said, we want to give it to you. And I said, you first go give it to the principal. If the principal approves, then I'm going to take it. The principal said, George, I talked up all the parents we called up. All the parents said, we are okay. They said, we don't want the pocket money for the next month, so please give it. And they gave. So I really believe the Lord has a plan for this. I want to finish this time, can we just take a little time just praying? Praying for the biggest need. Now, this is my vision. This is the vision. The vision is too big. I'm not wanting to just stop in India. God has now taken me to about 35 countries. I want to see that we go to several other countries across. There's a beautiful Zoom call I had during COVID. I did a 3-hour training during COVID once, and I was in tears when I finished the training, because the people who were there in that Zoom call when I was doing the training were people from Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, South Sudan, and South Sudan. These were the people who were. And all of them were sitting there and saying, we want to be trained. I'm also specially trained on children in war zone situations. I was in Egypt some time back, and I got trained in that. I came to the US, me and my wife, we came to the US to TCU, if you have heard of TCU in Dallas, and we got trained on how do you deal with some of these children. So we are not professional people, but we had to get trained, because if God has called us, we have to step up. We have to step up. And we have to be in a place of how we begin to walk in, So I want to take a little time, Is that okay? We just spend some time praying. Yeah, just pray. People here on these two, rows that are there, just pray. One of the things that we want you to pray is the team is right now working very hard in putting all the systems and procedures. I mean, building a physical place is one thing, but all the systems and procedures and everything, they're even working on developing an app. So there is a group that is developing an app where we can manage every child who's coming in. Even parents can monitor what's happening with the child, and they can have resources, a lot of different things, So would you just pray for that? The team has been working very hard in putting all of that systems, procedures, a lot of ideas. When a child is going to come, till the time the child is going to leave the campus, what's going to happen, And it's one of its kind. There is no center like that. There are hospital facilities, something like that, but not a center where I'm mixing up discipleship, the passionate place, and the professional place. So it's a very new path-breaking place for us, and we are getting a lot of consultants and ideas from different people. So please pray for the team. That's something that I would want you guys to pray for. Everyone here in these two rows, would you just pray that God would bring us the right people, the right people, as consultants, as people. We're reaching out to a lot of people. It's very interesting. Even there are some good Christian counselors and all of that. When we begin to talk to them, we immediately say no to them because they have gone way off. They are talking about yoga, they are talking about Reiki, they are talking about all kinds of that mindfulness, kind of a thing that they are talking about. We don't want to go into any of those directions, So as we are, pray that God will bring the right people. We can't do this alone. A vision like this, we can't do this alone. We want to partner alongside and see a lot of different people come alongside. So that's another prayer request that I would just say, So can we just pray together, please? Yeah, just pray together. Amen. Amen. The second request I would want you to pray for, and finally I'll have the pastor pray and close. The second request I want you to pray for is pray for favor from the government. It's very interesting. We are having that. It's very favor. There are people in the CWC and in the DCPO office, people who are calling us up. And this lady, very funny way, she called up some months back, and she said, "George, they don't like you, but they want you. They're asking, when are you finishing this place?" Very strong anti-Christians, they are, and things like that. We want to see such favor, that would come from the government. A lot of different things that needs to happen, So if you guys can, pray for it. For the people here, pray for the last bit that we need to raise. The last 3 crores that we need to raise. I know God will give it. On this trip, we were planning for some fundraisers and things like that. And I have no idea why all of those fundraisers fell off. It all fell off. Somebody, some death happened in one place, another place it happened, and things like that. And then I just said, okay, fine. The Lord has brought us this far, and He's always the Ebenezer. The Lord has helped us this far. So just pray. Again, in the favor of God, God has been very favorable. That I've even had this lovely connection with the Hobby Lobby owners, the Green family, the Mart Green, David Green, and all of them. And they've already been writing back and forth. They have not given anything yet, but somebody has spoken on our behalf to them, So I don't know what's going to come out of any of these things, but I think we just need to pray. Just pray what God can do and how God can do. So if these people can pray for it, so let's pray together. And finally, I'll have Pastor just pray and close. Yeah.